Hello everybody, welcome to another one of my detailed gun reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Winchester 1866 made by Uberti in Italy. This particular gun was made in 1966, which I quite like, 100 years after it was originally produced. And this particular one is in 22 long rifle, which is quite interesting. From this angle you probably won't be able to tell, although as soon as I flip it over it'll be immediately obvious that it isn't a centerfire rifle. First of all, a couple of apologies / sort of disclaimers. It's very difficult to focus on a gun with such a shiny brass receiver with everything else being so dark, so sorry if the contrast kind of changes or if anything's unclear at any point. I'll do my best to try and get it to focus on the kind of balance out the contrast like that so that it looks presentable. And also sorry that I couldn't fit the whole thing on. It's just simply too long for me to get it all in frame the way that I've got my camera set up here. With that said, let's take a closer look at this really nice looking gun. Hopefully the focus isn't going to change too much. Now, as I said earlier, from this side it looks fairly identical to any centerfire 1866 rifle. However, once you flip it over, you'll notice that immediately that it lacks the one thing that really defines the 1866, which is its King's patent loading gate. It also has a little gate there for the 22 caliber ammunition, which kind of identifies it as a rimfire rifle. But overall, I think the look is very good for a 22 rimfire. So you might be wondering why I ended up getting a gun like this as a rimfire gun, and I'm sure if you're watching this you know that Uberti produce a whole range of these, not only in different lengths, so they do the 24-inch rifle and the 19-inch carbine, which is what this one is, and they do a 16-inch trapper, and I think they do various other models, round barrel, octagonal, every caliber you can imagine, other than powerful ones really. You can get 38 special, 44-40, you can get a 32-20 and 44 special and 45 Colt and various other ones, pretty much the same as their 1873 rifle, with the exception that you can't get any of the more powerful Magnum cartridges in this because it is a toggle link gun with a brass receiver, so it's generally lower powered pistol caliber cartridges. And they do indeed still make it in 22 caliber as well. Why would you want a 22 caliber one of these? Well, this one was kind of one of those things where I saw it for a good price and I just got it. I didn't really care what caliber it was in. It cost me less than £300. This one was 275, I believe, which I think was a pretty good deal. But besides that, this is one of these rare guns that, when I say rare, it's rare in its quality that it's a 22 caliber gun that is very well made, very high quality. There's nothing cheap about it compared to the regular centerfire guns, unlike so many other rimfire guns. And it's just as big and heavy as the centerfire guns. This isn't scaled down, it's not lightweight, there's nothing cheapened about it. It is a proper 1866 replica. It's simply in 22 caliber, and it's actually a little bit heavier than the centerfire guns because there's so much more metal in the barrel where the hole is that bit smaller. And in fact, talking about comparison to the centerfire guns, which I'll go into a little bit more later, so one thing that I noticed quite quickly that I'm not sure if anyone else has really picked up on that owns one of these, it's actually more realistic in one particular way. If I get out my my Glock ruler here, if we quickly measure the lifter, and I'm just verify that it is of course clear. If I quickly measure the lifter, you'll find that it is about 34.2 millimeters long, which is the exact same length as the original 44 Henry rimfire cartridge. So this gun is actually, size-wise, in terms of the length of the receiver and the lifter, closer to the original than any of the centerfire guns, because all of the centerfire guns have extended lifters and therefore receivers to accommodate the longer cartridges. For instance, now this isn't exactly a great example because they don't do it in 357. Here's a 357 Magnum round. This is about the same length as a 44 Special or a 45 Colt though, which they do chamber it in. You can see that it's significantly longer, and you can see how they would indeed have to extend the lifter to accommodate a cartridge that long. So all of the centerfire versions of this, as far as I'm aware, do have overly long receivers and lifters compared to the original, whereas this one despite being unrealistic in some ways, that's actually more true to the original, because the 44 Henry rimfire was a very short, stumpy cartridge. Just a little bit of information you might have wanted to know. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, it does lack a proper loading gate, which is a bit of a shame. So from one side, it looks very realistic and might as well be a centerfire rifle. As soon as you flip it over, anyone that knows their Winchesters will know there's something up here, because where the King's patent loading gate should be, which of course is the main improvement over the Henry rifle that the Winchester 66 brought over that gun, was of course the King's patent loading gate and the fully enclosed magazine tube with a handguard. And yeah, this doesn't have it for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure why, but manufacturers just don't put traditional loading gates on rimfire versions of their guns. They almost always have the remove a tube, drop them in kind of system, which I'll show you in a minute, which is annoying. I don't like loading it that way, but that's just the way they seem to do it. And while I don't really like that system, one thing that is kind of nice about this particular example is that they do give you a little cover over the, see if I can focus on it. They do give you a little sliding sort of dust cover, I guess. So the loading procedure on this is, of course, make sure it's unloaded before you put your hands anywhere near the end. One thing I don't like about this system is, of course, having your fingers near the muzzle. Just never feels good. Anyway, you turn the little knurled knob on the end till it clicks. You pull out your rod, which has got your follower and your spring inside. And then, if you wanted to, you could just drop them in the end. Or you slide your little cover open like that. And you'll note that it is the exact shape of a 22 long rifle cartridge. I'll just grab one now, show you. These are just some Winchester subsonics that I shoot in it sometimes, because it's quite nice to just shoot something sort of quiet sometimes, and they are indeed very quiet in this. And you can see that the shape is just the right size exactly, and of course you'd be tilting it back so it drops down towards the lifter. And I have tried I have counted the capacity, and if I remember correctly, it'll take 14 in the tube and then 1 in the chamber to make 15 rounds of 22 long rifle. Now, I'm not sure about any other type of 22 ammunition, but I'm fairly certain it wouldn't work. I'm pretty sure it would jam up the lifter, because it would try and feed another round in on top of the one, or right in front of the one that's already loaded in there. This doesn't have any kind of stop inside. So it is going to be 22 long rifle only, and I'm pretty sure it is indeed marked, yeah, 22LR. So no 22 shorts or 22 long. It's purely 22 long rifle. So besides those things that I've just mentioned that define it and identify it as a rimfire rifle, everything else is just pure Uberti 1866. Excellent quality. This thing is so well built, and it has seen a lot of use over the years, a little bit of abuse. If we have a look on the side plate here, somebody obviously thought that the way to get that off was to jam a screwdriver in there and try and pry it off rather than to slide it off. Very clever. Same on the other side, so that's a shame, but it's quite an old gun. And in some ways it kind of adds to it. The fact that it isn't in absolutely perfect condition kind of makes it look a little bit more of an antique. I think for maybe just sort of the casual kind of gun guy, if you were to tell them this was an original 1866, they might actually believe you if they weren't particularly knowledgeable on Winchesters and didn't know what to look for. So that's pretty cool. For a 22, this is full size, it is full weight, this is a heavy gun. Actually, let's see if we can measure it on camera. I couldn't measure it, couldn't weigh it on this squidgy yoga mat here, so I just did it off camera, and it comes in about 3.5 kilograms, so it's quite a substantial rifle. That's one thing that I definitely noticed handling this for the first time compared to my 1892 Winchester, which is made by Chiappa in Italy, again in Italy. The 1892, which was designed by John Moses Browning, is simply a much more slim, trim kind of gun. It's a lot thinner, and of course you've got a steel receiver instead of brass, and it weighs a whole lot less. Obviously, spec for spec, these aren't exactly identical, but the 1892 is considerably thinner, and just a bit handier feeling. If we have a look here, you can see that the 1866, which is essentially a Henry rifle with a loading gate and a handguard, and then the 1873 is essentially the same gun again, but with a steel receiver. They're all quite bulky, large guns. The receiver is a lot longer, as you can see there. And although a lot of people really love the toggle link action and really swear by it, it's certainly a nice action, very smooth and everything. But I'm actually a big fan of the Browning designed guns with the proper locking system. I really like these, especially the Chiappa ones are really great guns. I'm going to be reviewing this gun soon. But yeah, talking about the toggle link, let's just have a look. Now, I've got in a habit of actually cocking the hammer first myself. The reason for this is that on rimfire guns, you'll find that the hammer springs, the main springs, are generally a lot stiffer than on centerfire guns. It's simply to ensure reliable ignition with a variety of 22 ammunition. So, I mean, here's some of the different ammo types I've been using. And even with the mainspring, the leaf spring in there, at its very tightest, so the hammer spring is indeed quite strong. You still get occasional unreliable ignition. I've been using mini mags. Always keep a good stock of mini mags at hand. Some of these Ely ones, which are similar in power to the mini mags. Some of the cheap ones, and again those Winchesters. I've been using a variety, and I have found, especially with some ammo types more than others, you don't get completely reliable ignition, and sometimes you'll have to recock the hammer, even though it is very stiff. Anyway, going back to what I was saying, that makes the whole action a lot stiffer than it should be for a toggle link. If you handle a centerfire toggle link gun, they are just one that's set up properly and nicely slicked. You can literally run the thing with one finger, which it looks like I'm able to do here, but then once you meet the resistance of the hammer, that's quite substantial. As soon as the hammer's out of the way, it becomes your lovely, slick toggle link action, which can be run very quickly and with really minimal effort. And I have done a little bit of work on this one myself, but it was already quite slick from all of the years of use. Notice the really nice bluing on the hammer and the trigger and the lever. The newer ones have color case hardened components, but this older one has blued ones, and I think they're very nice. The barrel is 19 inches, round, and is also blued, and bluing's nicely intact. Something worth noting, if you happen to find one of these for sale, this particular one was actually imported by Navy Arms. I assume it went to America before it came over here, so this is a Navy Arms marked gun. I think Navy Arms is an American company. And something that is kind of distinctive on the Navy Arms guns compared to the ones that Uberti sells now is that you've got the brass receiver and the brass butt plate, which I think is pretty standard. This also came with a brass front sight, barrel band and front sight, and barrel band for the handguard. I didn't particularly like the look of this. When I was looking at pictures of the originals, you didn't really see brass barrel bands as far as I could tell. So I got some of this Birchwood Casey blackening stuff for brass, and after a lot of trial and error and a lot of messing around and a lot of refinishing and refinishing and refinishing, I eventually got to a finish that isn't great, but it was kind of, I guess, acceptable. It's very difficult stuff to apply well, I find, and it does rub off quite easily as well. So definitely, it's definitely more difficult to permanently colour brass than it is steel. I know that. So like you can see, there's a bit of an odd mix of colours on the barrel band here, but I think it does kind of add to the look, perhaps. Doesn't look brand new, certainly. Talking about sights, so you've got that semicircular one moulded into the front barrel band, and then you've got this little flip-up one which actually got a little ladder sight, which is quite nice. Makes a nice difference to the regular buckhorn ones you get on these. So you've just got a little notch in the back for the rear sight, very small actually. Let me see if I can get a bit of paper so you can see. All right, that rag should do. Get the hammer out of the way. So rear sight is very small, so your sight picture looks like that. And then you can flip it up just in case you want to mess around and try and shoot. I think it is graduated. Can't actually read it from there. Oh, it isn't actually marked with numbers. It's got graduations on it. I'm not sure what kind of range this goes out to, but you can have it right up at the top there to try and lob your 22 rimfire as far as it'll possibly go. Get that back down. So when I bought this, I really wondered how it would perform being a 50-something-year-old gun that I seem to have been shot quite a lot. But the truth is, it's pretty much impossible to shoot out a barrel on a 22 rimfire. You're shooting you're shooting lead ammunition, lead bullets at not crazy velocities. So when I look down the bore, the rifling is still really nice and sharp and crisp on this, and it shoots really well. Except for what I was just talking about a minute ago with the light strikes occasionally. Quite a lot of the time, hammer will drop, nothing will happen, it'll take another strike. One of those things you will get with an older rimfire like this. It's quite possible that the firing pin needs a little bit of reshaping or something like that. But I shouldn't complain too much. I got it for a good price. And really, it's just one of those guns that I get out to have a look at. Really nice to have a brass receiver gun that isn't one of those horrible Henry big boy things. I really can't stand those. Sorry if you've got one. I think they're really ugly. A few unusual things I noticed about this gun. First of all, it came with a safety, which I actually removed because I just didn't find it necessary. There was a little safety in here, the same as on a Winchester 1873. Now, one of the reasons I like the 1866 is because it doesn't have that safety. If you shoot slowly and you're not trying to do cowboy action, getting as many rounds out a second as you possibly can, and you're shooting at a sensible rate, you really don't need that outer battery safety there. As long as you're sure that you're holding the lever closed with every round, I really don't think it's much of an issue. And I found that on this gun in particular, whether it had been tampered with or whether it was like that from the factory, it was just incredibly stiff. It held the lever out about that far, and it required such a tight grip. It was very difficult to shoot accurately because you were focusing on trying to hold this thing shut the whole time. So that was easy enough to pop out from the inside. And yeah, I don't recommend removing safeties from guns, but the original 1866 didn't have this. I don't think it's necessary, especially on a rimfire. Just make sure if you ever did anything like that, holding the lever closed when you shoot it and you're not trying to shoot it ultra fast. Again, I can't recommend doing that, but I didn't see the use for it on this particular gun, and it's truer to the original 1866 without it. So that was one weird thing. Another weird thing, which I really can't get my head around, is that the trigger is actually articulated. So as you can see here, it has a certain amount of dead movement, and that isn't actually moving the sort of the sear engagement surface. This is just the bottom half of it, almost like you get with modern striker-fired pistols. It just moves freely, and then when you can see it flopping around there, and then when it gets to the very back of the travel, then you've got a very short and crisp break. It's actually a very good trigger. But yeah, every time you cycle it, it kind of flops forward again, and it's just got this really strange bit of movement. Almost feels like it's broken, but indeed, when I took it apart, it came apart in two pieces that are meant to kind of loosely fit together, and it's only when you actually get it to the back of the trigger pull that it actually engages up there. Does what it's meant to do. Very odd. Not really sure what that's about. Another thing that I found a little odd compared to the modern ones is these cutouts on the hammer. So you can see they're kind of almost lightened. The hammer's almost lightened where it should be solid, but you can kind of see into it. So that's kind of interesting. Another thing is the profile of the stock. Now, admittedly, I haven't held an original Henry or an original 1866, so I don't know what they're like, but the top of the stock is very square. You'd think that, where your cheek's going to be going would be rounded off. So like on my 1892, it's kind of slightly squared, but it's pretty well rounded, but it's distinctively square on this gun. Also, notice how nice this wood is, given its age. Even with its age and a few little marks and things on it, it's a really nice piece of wood and fits very, very well to the receiver. Very close fit. But yeah, very sharp kind of square shape. I mean, look at that. It looks like someone's chopped it off. Kind of odd. It doesn't make it any less comfortable, to be honest. So yeah, kind of interesting. Now, I don't think there's all that much more to talk about. However, I thought I would treat you to a little bit of toggle link porn because it's just such a satisfying action. I'm not a massive fan of it in terms of like practical use, I suppose. I've shot some 1873s and they're really nice and smooth and everything, but there's just something in the back of my mind that I don't entirely trust their strength, I suppose. I wouldn't want one of these in a powerful caliber. I mean, you can get the 1873 from Uberti in 44 Magnum, which just seems ridiculous to me. I know that with modern metallurgy and everything, everything's a lot stronger than it once was, but you're still talking about a knee joint. I don't like the idea of it, but certainly in 22, there's no problem. And it's just such a satisfying action. Look at that. Oops, I get my foot out of shot. Just sounds so good. Love it. Right, so probably time for a conclusion. I find I end a lot of these videos the exact same way, where I say, I found one for a great price. If you see one for a good price, go get it. Whether I would pay a retail price for this, I'm not sure. I mean, they're beautifully made guns, certainly. But if you were to buy one of these brand new 19-inch round barrel carbine from Uberti, on Henry Crank at the moment, they are £950 or £944 or somewhere thereabouts, nearly £1,000. That's a lot of money. And they're great quality guns and everything, but that is a lot of money for a rimfire. If I was going to spend that kind of money, I'd definitely be going for a centerfire. I'd get it in 44-40, maybe 45 Colt. Something a little bit more substantial. In some way, it just feels like you're getting more for your money with a centerfire gun. Whereas a rimfire, there's something in the back of your mind where it just should be cheaper. So for the kind of price I paid for this, less than £300, an absolute no-brainer. One of my best purchases to date, I think. But yeah, whether I would recommend spending £1,000 near enough on one of these brand new, probably not. But at the same time, I can't really fault them. They are really nice guns. Shoot really well, as good as any other 22. And like I said earlier, what's really nice about them is they are full size, full weight. At least from this angle, they look just like an original. So yeah, great guns. Up to you whether they're going to be worth £1,000.